Hello, welcome to another episode of Asexualize My Asexual Life. This is a place to be for education about asexuality, all things asexual. So, if you're not already subscribed to my Asexualize channel, make sure you are right now. Tonight, I'm live streaming on three places: YouTube, my Asexualize page, and my personal Facebook page. This is a very special episode. It's all about how sexual conditioning affects asexuals both growing up and as adults. So I thought it's imperative that I share this live across multiple platforms. So first of all, we have to understand what is sexual conditioning. Everyone is conditioned from birth to believe certain things about themselves, about their life, about what should and shouldn't happen in their life, about things in general. It's conditioning we get largely, first of all, by our caregivers, which is often our parents. Then, as we go to school, we get conditioned. College, university, we get conditioned. We get conditioned by people that we come into contact with, friends, family, relations, media. Everything is conditioning. And what do I mean by this? What I mean is people instill things in your mind that create your beliefs. And it's only when you become consciously aware that other people have implanted their beliefs in your brain that you can begin to decipher and untangle whether those thoughts are actually your own or whether they belong to someone else. Whether you want to keep them as your own because you, as a being, agree with them, or whether you want to let them go because they're actually someone else's thoughts that you personally, within your soul, do not agree with. This is a huge concept for some people. People don't realize they're being conditioned, and conditioning is a form of control often, and it's to keep you thinking a certain way. Thus, if you are in a particular type of culture, which is different for different countries, different societies, different for groups of people, different religious groups, you'll be conditioned to think a certain way. If you grow up with a certain type of family background, you'll be conditioned to think certain things are okay and certain things are not. This is why sometimes when kids have abusive parents, parents that are hitting each other, or one's hitting the other, kids can sometimes mimic that behavior later on and think it's fine because they saw their parents do it. Unfortunately, my parents are nothing like that. But I'm just saying, if you have got a situation like that, again, with things like alcoholism, alcoholics, again, my parents, my dad doesn't barely ever drink, and my mum might have a drink at Christmas. And that's about it, right? So this doesn't apply to my personal family, but I've known of people and situations where they have alcoholic parents, or they have an alcoholic boyfriend or an alcoholic girlfriend, and it instills in them, if they spend enough time with them, that that is acceptable and allowed if they've got abusive behavior, because the alcohol is to blame. They are responsible for putting the alcohol in their body, right? So whatever environment you grow up in, and whatever environment you surround yourself in, and people you surround yourself within, you become like the mind and the beliefs of those people usually around you. It's very difficult to maintain your own sense of identity and beliefs when you are surrounded by people who think and believe differently from you. Now, as the largest population in the world is still heterosexuals, we are conditioned from birth predominantly by heterosexuals, but also from other types of sexuals. The majority of the world still run and maintained and sustained by sexuals, that everyone wants sex. This is what we're conditioned to believe, that sex is a normal, natural thing for everyone. And that if you don't have sex, there's something wrong with your relationship, your life, you're unhealthy, and there's a problem. This is what we're conditioned. So you have to understand it's conditioning, it's programming. It's people injecting their opinions, views, and beliefs on you over and over again. And once this is done over a sustained period of time, particularly, you often begin to believe it yourself. But if you're asexual, there ends up being a discrepancy between the things you're being told and what you actually feel. And this discrepancy can cause very much disconcertion. It can cause you to feel lonely and isolated and lost and disconnected from yourself. And it can cause you some mental kind of torture, mental ill health. And it can make you feel very weird, like you're an alien in the world, because it's like everyone's speaking a foreign language. And more, you're just not recognizing it anymore. Now, for a long time, we might be in a societal conditioned trance. Hello, Jonathan. Lovely to see you. And what I mean by this is it's very difficult until we wake up somehow to our asexuality to know any different. So we can be in this like societal trance where we believe that we're meant to have sex, whether we feel we're meant to have sex or not. We believe that we're meant to have sex because that's what everyone is telling us. We believe everyone, obviously not completely everyone, but the majority of people are telling us. If all we've got around us is sexuals and everyone in our life is sexual and telling us that's how we need to behave and that's the natural thing, then that's everyone in our world, an environment that we know of. So it feels like everyone anyway. Does this make sense? So we are, as a society, still the world population is mostly run by sexuals, and so therefore they have the biggest voice in the world, and therefore they are constantly bombarding us with images of sexy lingerie, images of genitalia. We're constantly bombarded in a lot of movies and adverts and magazines and media that sex is a popular thing, that you have to have sex, that sex is wonderful, and that sex is this great thing that everyone should be interested in. And you're an adult when you start having sex, right? And all this is programming and conditioning you to believe that that's the way life should be, that's the way life is. And anything that deviates from that is considered abnormal, unnatural, and a problem often, right? But it is literally conditioning you. Conditioning is a form of programming your mind, and in a way, it's a form of manipulation and control. And everyone in the world at some point in their life has been controlled in this way, has been programmed in this way. You're programmed by your family, like I said, your teachers, your friends, society, people you come across. You know, everything and everyone actually is programming things in your brain. And what you have to do is spend some time with yourself to get to know yourself and know that something is wrong and it's not quite right for you. And when you begin to feel that this isn't quite right for me, you begin to notice that you're different. And if you're growing up thinking you're different, but everyone at your school or college is talking about, for example, sex and how great it is and how hot the date is and how what base they got to. I don't understand all that stuff, but base is basically how intimate getting off and all that type of stuff, right? So when I was at school, for example, I used to hear them say like disgusting stuff like finger of fudge and stuff like that, and I didn't have a clue what it meant. I thought it was a I'm thinking, why are they talking about chocolate bars in school in a sexual context? And I didn't get it was to do with sticking fingers up the backside, basically. I didn't even know that. Kind of like, I think I was doing, is it doing research for my Asexual Guide to Sex book? And I started to know about this stuff. I'm like, oh, that's what they were talking about at school. Because when you're asexual, you don't really understand fully what the sexual connotations are, what sexual stuff they're talking about. If you don't practice that yourself, if you're not interested in it yourself, if you don't do these things yourself, and if you really are not seeking this stuff out, unless you have it like plonked upon you, you kind of like don't really understand it. And even when I heard these terms, I didn't know what they were because I didn't participate in stuff like that. Right. So as a child growing up, you can feel very isolated. You can feel like someone robbed you of your own identity. Like, where's your own identity? And you can be searching for it for years, right? And then when you get into a relationship, you can feel like you have to have sex, which is what I thought years ago, because that's normal and you're expected. And that is what everyone does. I didn't actually know there was anything different. And for a long time, I just thought I was a person who was heterosexual but wasn't really into having sex and not bothered about it. I didn't actually realize that they were asexuals. And I didn't even know till 2014 that asexuality existed. I honestly thought I was the only one in the world, planet, universe that felt the way I did. And it got to the stage where I couldn't do dating anymore because of the expectation of sex at the end of the night made me almost wet myself. I just couldn't do it anymore. However hot a guy was, however much I was kissing him, however aroused I felt, I just like the sex thing just wasn't, going anywhere. I was just like, oh, I can't do that anymore. I just can't bring myself to do it. My being, my mind just doesn't want it, no matter what my body reactions are. And I think that's kind of some of the myths with asexuality. Sometimes your body isn't the same as your mind. Sometimes your body can have arousal responses. Sometimes your body can have like a yearning, but it's not kind of aimed at anything or anyone. It's kind of in the moment and it's a biological response rather than, oh, I really want sex or I love sex. Because often you don't, but you can still get, some asexuals can still get bodily responses, not all asexuals. Some asexuals don't get aroused at all, right? So I think you've got to really understand that every asexual is different. But when you're growing up as different types of asexuals as well, your story can be very different in some ways to someone else's. Because if you're a person who experiences no romance growing up, as well as no sexual attraction, so you're an aromantic asexual, for example, you can be missing and not understanding all the sexual talk that's going on, but also the romantic stuff. When someone watches a romantic movie and says, oh, wasn't that guy hot and horny? And didn't you just want to snog him and do romantic things? You're thinking, no, I don't get it. And so, if that's the case, then growing up without romantic attraction or without sexual attraction can be even more confusing because you're kind of feeling left out a lot. And the problem is, a lot of people associate romance with sex. A lot of people associate romance with a relationship and sex with a relationship. And they kind of think romance and sex go together in a relationship. So if you're an asexual who's sex repulsed like I am, but desires a romantic relationship because I'm hugely romantic, then it's kind of considered as kissing and romantic stuff leads on to sex. And, I get this from a lot of guys going, oh, yeah, that's a precursor to sex. That's a prequel to sex. It's like, I don't want sex. I just want the kissing and romance, which is like the teenager part where you have all the excitement and love feelings and lovely dates, but it's triple confusing when also paired with a trans identity, says Jonathan. Yes, it would be more confusing. I totally agree with you. I'm not trans myself, but I think about 10% of the asexual population is non-binary, which trans comes under. And well, it does for most people. Most people who identify as trans also identify as non-binary, but it doesn't have to. So it must be really hard. I mean, I know people who are gender fluid and who are cross dressers and stuff like that. So it is harder for them as a child as well and growing up. And like you say, it's triple confusing if you're asexual, aromantic, and trans, because you just don't identify with the gender norms or the romantic norms or the sexual norms. And having all this conditioning by society that you have to be a certain way and fit into a certain mold just makes life very awkward and uneasy and upsetting sometimes because you feel like you can't be yourself and accepted. When what we really should be doing in the world is fostering love, caring, acceptance, and kindness towards all genders, towards all sexualities, right? This doesn't mean to say you accept someone who's doing something to you that's abusive. That's not what I'm talking about, right? Because obviously you could have someone who's sexual and asexual, and the sexual's going, oh, well, you have to accept me for who I am and I have sex with you. That's not what I mean. Acceptance is accepting people for who they are, but it doesn't mean to say you even have to have them in your life if you don't want them in your life, but you can respect other people without them directly being a part of your life if you don't want them as part of your life. But you can respect the fact that people are different. I'm an asexual person who hates BDSM stuff, can't stand any BDSM stuff. I'm not into that type of stuff. But I have a friend who is into that type of stuff. Just because I don't like it personally and I personally find it abusive doesn't mean to say I can't listen to them and how they enjoy it. Because I've got a way about me that understands and accepts other people, regardless of the fact I'm not like that. It's the opposite to me. Obviously, I couldn't have a relationship with someone who does BDSM stuff, whether they're my friend or not, because I can't do that type of stuff. Um, so you've got to understand your own limits and how you feel and how you are. And you've got to understand as time goes on what you're prepared to do and what's your own mind. So when you're a child and you're growing up and you're being conditioned and you're being programmed by society and other people around you and everyone's telling you like have sex, have romance, have sex on the first date or whatever, have sex after 2 dates, hook up, blah blah blah, all this sex stuff, dress sexily, dress up for someone with loads of makeup on to attract someone and all this lot, which is taking you away actually from your true kind of like soul and being stripped down. Like a lot of people think they have to wear makeup in order to look sexy and hot. A lot of people think they have to wear makeup in order to be attractive. You'll notice that I hardly ever wear makeup. I don't wear makeup that often because I don't think I need makeup to be beautiful. I don't go around telling myself, oh, you need a bunch of makeup to be beautiful, Sandra. You can't go out in public unless you've got makeup on. Makeup actually ruins a lot of the skin on the face. You see people with makeup year after year after year, and you'll start to notice all the texture of their skin is all lumpy and stuff like this. So, it's not necessarily a good thing. I personally don't like wearing too much makeup and not makeup very often, right? But some people love makeup. It's their thing. They're a makeup artist, right? So we're all different. So whoever you're going to listen to, it's better if you can listen to people and be around people who actually think very similar to you. But it's also good to have some other people's opinions and views so that you get a different flavor and life of the world, if you like. But when you are in this hub of sexual programming for so many years, then the whole message throughout majority of a lot of years of your life is often sex is great, sex is wonderful, sex is healthy, and it's kind of forced and pushed on you so much that you begin to believe that's the normal. And so therefore, if you deviate, you feel kind of naughty or weird or strange, and then you suppress your own emotions and feelings down. And you feel like you're not really being true to who you are, but you don't want people's opinions to destroy your mind and to upset you, because if you tell the truth, or you believe if you tell the truth, that people will shun you or punish you or be nasty to you. Jonathan, breaking free of conditioning, both sexuality, romance, and gender can be a satisfying moment like leaving the matrix. Yes, Jonathan, I totally agree with you. So it's on screen now, Jonathan's comment. Breaking free of conditioning, I'm reading it again, both sexually, romance, and gender can be a satisfying moment like leaving the matrix. Yeah. It is very similar to that. Like, we are in a world and society which is totally conditioning us all the time. And what does surprise me is because I'm in the entrepreneur world a lot of the time as well. I've been in entrepreneurship since 2012. To me, entrepreneurship is mindset and lifestyle. And it's a lot to do with how different you think. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they do believe and they do understand that you're conditioned. You're conditioned growing up to do a 9 to 5 job, a conventional job, a job like an accountant or a physician, like a doctor, or some sort of admin work or something like that. You're conditioned for a 9 to 5 normal job, not usually a creative job, not usually photography, artist, writer. You're usually conditioned, and a lot of entrepreneurs understand that, but they haven't clicked on necessarily yet to the fact that sexuality is conditioned, and that sex is a condition and programming. The fact that you want, like, and need sex a lot of the time, that's conditioning. And so we do, as asexuals, have that in common with entrepreneurs, in the sense that we both can see that society is programmed and conditioned us to be a way that's not actually good for everyone, right for everyone, and that there are other options out there. But we've got a way to go before, I think, a lot of the entrepreneurs understand that heterosexuality being considered the norm and sex being considered the norm is also programming and conditioning. And I want more and more people to understand that they have been programmed and conditioned to believe heterosexuality is normal, and that sex in relationships a lot of the time is normal, right? I want people to understand it's conditioning. You don't have to agree with that conditioning and that programming. You can break free of it, right? You can have your own thoughts and your own life and your own ways of doing things. You don't have to have sex in a relationship for it to be a relationship, which is something that very much annoys me, is the fact that people believe if you're not having sex in a relationship, you don't have a relationship. It doesn't exist. And this isn't true. The only people that should be defining what a relationship consists of is the people in that relationship, no one else. There are people who are married couples that don't have sex for years. No one goes around saying you're not in a relationship because you haven't had sex for like 2 or 5 years or whatever. No one says that to them, right? But a lot of people keep it quiet that they're not having sex in heterosexual relationships because they don't want people to know that, because they think it's shameful, or society will frown upon them. We should be having a lot more open, honest conversations about sex and about actually how many people do have it all the time. There are some guys who like it a lot. I get loads of guys come to me who have high sex drives and want sex. It doesn't mean to say they're all having sex. A lot of the time, I get the same guys liking me on Badoo website, for example, keep coming around. It's like, we've already established I don't have sex and you want it, so why like me again? It just annoys me, really. But it's like, you were respectful the first time and agreed that you want sex and I don't. You left my life, so why come back into it again? But like, we have to deal with these people. So what I would say is, the conditioning does affect you both in school and growing up through college and uni, because obviously in college and uni, sex is still talked about and discussed. It's, a lot of the time when you kind of transition from school to college, or like in the UK, it's usually school, college, then uni. In America, it's, often people go to school later on in their life, they might study degrees in school, I believe. I'm not in America, but I hear a lot of people say school when they're like older than 16 or older than 18 sometimes, you know what I mean? So I think different states and different countries have different systems. But what I'm trying to say is that as you go through, often the transition from your teen years into more adulthood is when you're still expected to have sex. You're expected to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend and be in a relationship and have sex. Do you know what I mean? It carries on through those later years, and you can still feel very isolated, and you can still feel very lonely and left out. And, although asexuality is part of LGBTQIA, the A stands for asexual, and a lot of people believe aromantic and agender as well. Then, we are part of the LGBT plus spectrum. And again, this is not, asexuality is not really talked about in schools or colleges and universities. But even the LGBT plus community, apart from being asexual, the others are still driven by sex. They're still sexually attracted to someone, even if it is different to the normal sexual attraction, as in, it's a minority sexual orientation. I'm minority sexually attracted to someone because it's bisexual or pansexual or homosexual, for example, right? So those people are still sexually driven. They still want sex, usually, often. They're still sexually attracted unless they are asexual. So you've still got the majority of the world being heterosexual. Then you've got the majority of the LGBT plus community sexual. So you've got all this sexual conditioning and all these people flaunting that sex is great, show your genitalia off, show your body parts off. This is what's acceptable. This is what you should be doing, right? So why do you think in some cultures they actually keep covered up? They keep the woman covered up, right? In cultures, it's very interesting because I don't think people should go around covering themselves up, like, and that should be normal either, right? But what I'm saying is, for example, in the Muslim religion, some people believe that the woman should be having a veil over her head and a veil over her face, right? But those guys who want a woman to be like that for a wife, they will actually be with other types of women to get sex. Even though some Muslims aren't supposed to have sex because of their religion, they will still have sex, right? And they will go and date women that are more loose, if you like, which is a horrible term to use, but it's like that's the type of language they think and the way they think. Women that are showing their bodies off, open to sex, which is, just because a woman has her boobs on display doesn't mean to say she wants sex with someone, right? A woman should be able to dress how she wants, and it's up to her whether she wants sex or not. Just because she has her boobs on display, she might want them on display for herself. I'm not interested in boobs on display personally. I don't like it, but there we go. But what I'm trying to say is, often a lot of foreign guys will like a woman who is like free with her clothing and shows cleavage and stuff like that to have sex with and have a temporary relationship with. But when it comes to actually being married, they want a woman like covered up a lot of the time because they know or they believe that a woman that's covered up is less likely to go off and have affairs or sexual relationships or be promiscuous with other people. She's more likely to be submissive, if you like. And so it's quite shocking that guys who would consider a girl for a relationship would never actually marry that girl unless they looked a certain way. Let me propose a religion where the men wear blindfolds instead. That's quite funny, Jonathan. Oh, dearie me. Well, yes. I personally don't like a lot of I personally don't like nudity, do I? So we have this conditioning going on, and what can be done about it? Well, first, it's good to have discussions like this where we open people's eyes to the fact they are being conditioned by society. I would love all heterosexuals to understand they've been conditioned and programmed that way. Now they can agree with that conditioning, they can agree with that programming, they can feel that that is their identity and want to keep it, right? And that's theirs to own, right? But there also will probably be a proportion of people identifying as heterosexual that are like, hang on a minute, I've been conditioned, I've been programmed, this has been instilled in my brain, but I'm feeling slightly different. I'm not thinking and feeling the same way as everyone else does. Hang on a minute, what's going on here? Let's look at it. Let's separate how I was programmed, conditioned from birth and growing up in society, in school and colleges, and when I was around different people. Let's think. Let's just strip this, separate this and strip it out. So we've got, this is what I was programmed to believe, and this is what I actually think and believe. They're two different things sometimes. And I think until we have a society where we can actually see that we're program conditioned with everything, not just with a 9 to 5 job, but with everything, and that we have choices in life, we're not going to get as far in terms of acceptance of each other. So we need to open people's minds up to the fact that they have been conditioned. They have been controlled, if you like, to think this way. And what is really hard is if you grow up in families where, if you are, or if you discover you're homosexual, for example, you're gay, and you're a guy who's into guys, but your family brought you up that being gay is wrong and that you shouldn't feel those feelings. That is going to be very traumatizing to have grown up in that environment and to be around those people. And maybe they're your parents, those people, and they still believe that. And you've got a battle going on internally with the fact that you're attracted to guys and you're a guy, but your parents think it's unnatural and wrong. And so, therefore, there's a discrepancy between your programming, your parents, and who you are. And you can feel unloved and unsupported. But we have to have a point in our life where we say enough is enough and we decide to go our own way, choose what our parents, caregivers, or those closest to us believe or think. You have to understand that you are here in your own right in your life, and you do not have to take on the programming and conditioning that other people have instilled into you. This applies to everything. I don't know why some people think it applies to just like 9 to 5 jobs and things like that, or other things in life that are conditioned and limited beliefs and stuff. The stuff I was talking about on my Make Money Make Cash channel earlier, actually, with the lovely Lisa Schermerhorn, those limiting beliefs. But people don't understand that sexuality and liking, wanting, needing sex is also a programming and conditioning from birth. And, we have to untangle that and unravel that and be able to think for ourselves. Unfortunately, a lot of religions and cultures are very strict in what they allow people to think and believe. And people are often punished for believing or thinking in different things. That's to keep them in line, to keep control of them, right? So when we stop giving a fuck, excuse my language, about what other people think of us, about what other people are doing in their lives, when we start to truly love ourselves and believe in ourselves and understand that we are different and we accept our differences, and we don't care if someone calls us weird or nut job or whatever they say. We can block people who are rude to us like that, right? But when it's like, people think we're crazy or whatever, we can just like say whatever you think is your thoughts. They're not my thoughts. Right? I'm allowed to be different. I'm allowed to think that sex is not natural for me. I'm allowed to think that sex isn't right for me. I'm allowed to think that love without sex does exist. I'm allowed to know inside my soul that sex exists without love. Therefore, love exists without sex. You don't have to have sex to have love. You don't have to have sex to have a relationship. And so the way we can deal with it is having more open and honest conversations about things like this. But also, we need to be able to tear ourselves away from the people who gave us that conditioning in the first place and be able to spend time with ourselves working out what we really believe for ourselves. There are people in relationships now who aren't having sex who are thinking something's extremely wrong. And it's probably causing a huge rift between them. And they're probably not even talking about it, right? If people are having more open, honest conversations about sex and the way they really feel about it, then it will solve a lot more intimacy problems. There's loads of different ways you can be intimate without having sex. Sharing your innermost thoughts and feelings and secrets is one of those ways in which you can be intimate, right? On a deep emotional level. When you emotionally connect with someone's soul, that is intimacy. When you are in the same space as someone, even, that's intimacy. When you're stroking their hair, that's intimacy. When you are actively listening to someone's conversation and you're responding accordingly to prove you've listened, that's a form of intimacy because you're kind of being close with that person. You're integrating yourself with that person in that situation. And so we have to get away from the fact that you have to have sex in order to have a loving, caring, committed, healthy relationship, because you don't have to have sex to have any of those things. Jonathan, for me, deep philosophical conversations is intimacy. Yes, I would say that's a very, very good one for intimacy, Jonathan. I think quite a few people would agree with you on that as well. Um, I do like talking about anything and everything. I like to have a person, for example, in a relationship. Even in a friendship, it's good when you can talk about anything and everything, right? If you want an intimate relationship that's more than a friendship, you can go even further with the conversation. But you can have intimacy with friends or romantic partners. It depends what you're comfortable with yourself. But I do agree that philosophical conversations is intimacy, but that's Jonathan's, but I agree with it. So we have to like rethink what intimacy is, rethink what relationships are. And we have to understand that, yes, some people do experience sexual attraction. Some people need sex in a relationship. Some people want sex in a relationship. Some people enjoy sex in a relationship. But we have to understand that it's natural for some people not to want sex in a relationship, for not to like sex, for it not to feel good for some people, for people not to want it. Both people can have relationships. Both people can have intimate relationships, just in different ways. And so by having more open, honest conversations like this, we're able to have some impact in the world so that people can begin to think and see the world and relationships within the world differently to what they've been brought up and conditioned to believe. Another thing is to take ownership ourselves. So when we're asexual, we can't control other people's behavior, right? We can't control their thoughts and feelings, right? Although people do control people's thoughts and feelings to a certain extent when they program and condition them, right? And so to unwind all that conditioning and programming that's been in them for years by the majority population is hard work, right? It's going to take possibly years and is taking years for people to understand there's a different way, right? And I'm not here to program people to believe that everyone shouldn't have sex or shouldn't need it or shouldn't want it. I'm here to say there is a different way of being and a different way of having a relationship that should be acceptable to society and should be acceptable as the norm for some people. So that when people are on dating sites, I'm not getting guys in my inbox going, oh, well, I want a relationship, and they always think it involves sex. And if I say I don't want sex, they always think, oh, well, you want a friendship then. And it's kind of like they're confusing themselves. It's like, I want a relationship with romance and kissing without sex, but I do not kiss my friends. I do not get romantic with my friends, right? They're my friends. I don't have that level of physicality with my friends. And they quite a lot of guys think, oh, you just want a friendship. It's like, I don't just want a friendship. I've got a best friend. I don't need a ton of friends. I like to have small quantities and quality of friends, and I've got so much stuff to do as it is that I don't need a ton of friends, right? And I have my community here, my asexual community, and my asexual groups and stuff. It's a lot of people I have contact with in that way, but often I'm spending a lot of time on my own as well. I'm fine with that. And actually, if you're going to get a partner in the future, you need to be able to dedicate a amount of time to them. If you've got so many friends, you don't have time to dedicate to your special one, right, in the future. So you've got to bear all this stuff in mind. So it's important to know, and people on dating sites to know, and in society to know, that it's okay to have love without sex. And I would like to, this message to topple over and spread around the world. It's okay, for some people not to do that, not to want it, not to need sex. It's okay to be without that. When you do have a teenager relationship and you're not having underage sex, then you can have a 1 or 2 year relationship, and you can feel like you love the other person, but you're not having sex with them. No one turns around to a 14-year-old girl who for example is with a 18-year-old guy, or six, and they've 4 years difference. No one turns around to them and says you should be having sex, because it's like breaking the law, right? So that 18-year-old, if they're in the UK, for example, that 18-year-old would have to wait till the girl is, say it was a guy who's 18 and the girl was 14, they were in a relationship, the guy would have to wait in the UK till the girl's 16, because that's the legal age for sex in the UK. I think it should be higher, personally. So, no one says if a 14-year-old's with an 18-year-old, they might think it's a little bit strange, the age gap, but no one would say, oh, you're not having a relationship because you're not having sex, right? But if someone's abiding by the law, they have to have a relationship without sex for the years that that person is underage to have sex. They can't have sex because it's against the law, right? Although some people go against the law, I know. But what I'm trying to say is no one goes around saying, oh, you're not having a proper relationship. You just want a friendship, right? That's not what they say. But when you're an adult and you go on a dating site, like, oh, I want a relationship. It's like, I want a relationship too, but you want sex and I don't, and they automatically assume that a relationship involves sex. And this needs to be changed so that we can have much more pleasant experiences on dating sites and dating apps, because there should be people knowing that not everyone is having sex. It shouldn't be a shock to loads of guys I talk to that you don't want sex, like, and they just don't get it. They're like, oh, what happened to you in your life that you don't want sex? It's like, I'm not having sex because I'm traumatized, because if I wanted sex, I damn well have it, but I don't want it. I've done that in my past. I really can't bring myself to do it again. I'm not interested in it. I like the kissing and romance and stuff like that. As you go through your asexual journey, you usually, if you accept your asexuality about yourself, you usually end up understanding more about your own body, your own wants, your own needs, that you can actually end up repressing and suppressing if you're in a relationship with a heterosexual person and you don't understand your asexuality, or you think you're heterosexual. Because I thought I was heterosexual for years. And what I liked was the kissing and the touching in a relationship. I just wanted that. The bit where we had sex, I wasn't really bothered about. I'd rather have not bothered doing that. But I was in a heterosexual relationship for years. I've been in multiple heterosexual relationships. And that was what I thought I had to do, although I probably did it a lot less sometimes than other people did, right? Because I'd rather have done the washing up, and I hate washing up, because to me, sex is not love, right? I can see why some people like it. I can understand the closeness feelings of it. I felt everything. Some asexuals feel numb and they feel disassociated from themselves when they have sex because they don't want to do it. It's not natural to them, right? So some asexuals that have sex are disassociated from themselves, right? And when you disassociate like that, often it is a trauma response. So if some asexuals are pushing themselves to have sex to please their partner, but they're disassociating themselves in the process, this is very bad for their mental health and it's very traumatizing, right? If you're having to take yourself out of your own body or your own head and be out of that experience because it's something that you can't cope with or deal with yourself, that's not good. However, there's probably some asexuals that just naturally are disassociated from sex, and therefore they could have it without causing themselves harm. But I would always question, like, is the disassociation between you and the sexual object part of your asexuality identity, or is it because you really don't want to have sex and you feel traumatized by it? Because I want you to know that sex can be traumatizing if you don't naturally want it. It's very bad that people think that, like, people think you have sex, then you get the trauma because you have a bad sexual experience. And sex, if you overcome that sexual traumatic experience, then you want sex again. But if sex is the thing that traumatizes you because you don't actually want it in the first place, you don't need it, then it's actually detrimental if someone's trying to make you or think it's good for you to have sex again to get rid of your trauma, because it's the sex that's causing the trauma in the first place, the act of having it, because you don't want it, because you're not naturally that way wired. Do you see what I mean? There's a confusion there. Like, a lot of people think, oh, you've had sexual trauma, therefore you're asexual. So you had a bad sexual experience, that's why you became asexual, right? Asexuality is actually genuine sexual orientation that's a lack of sexual attraction. It's not based on if you've had trauma or not. I'm not saying there aren't some people who identify as asexual because they have had trauma, because I have come across those. But asexuality is different to having a traumatic experience that caused you not to have sex. If you have got problems with trauma because of sexual experience and that's the only thing stopping you having sex, then you need to see a therapist, right? But if you look at someone and think, I don't, just don't feel like you want sex with anyone, you don't look at anyone and think, I want sex with them, then you'd often be asexual, right? And If you can trace it back to a trauma and you damn well know it's a trauma, then get it, get some therapy, work through that. You still don't have to have sex if you don't want to, whether you've had trauma or not, because it's your body, your mind, and your soul. And maybe you don't want that anymore anyway. But what I'm trying to say is, if people think that sex is the answer and that getting over your trauma then makes you want sex, that isn't necessarily the case, because there's some people who definitely don't want sex in the first place. And to actually put them in a sexual position is the trauma, because they're not naturally like that. It's like trying to force a lesbian who's attracted to women only, like not bi, an actual lesbian, to have sex with a guy when she doesn't want to. Like, that's going to traumatize the hell out of her if she's not attracted to a guy and doesn't want it, right? And it's not like, oh, you've had trauma with a guy, so that's why you're a lesbian. It's like, no, I'm not a lesbian, but just say this person was a lesbian, then they're a lesbian, so therefore they're gonna have trauma if they're having sex with someone who's not their type, who they don't feel comfortable with, who they don't want sex with, who they're not attracted to sexually, right? Do you see what I mean? So sex can be a source of trauma, either because you did have a traumatic experience due to this, to the person who was having sex with you not being good for you, not being good with you, not treating you well. But you can also have a traumatic experience with sex where it just wasn't natural for you because it's not right for you, because society's rammed it down your throat that it is natural for you, that you should be doing and having it. But within your soul and mind and spirit, you just know that actually it's not for me. I don't look at someone and think I want sex. I don't miss sex. I don't crave sex. I don't want it. Right. And so, of course, anything that's done against your will, even if you've been programmed and conditioned, is not going to be healthy for you. Right. Me going around thinking I've got to have sex because I'm in a relationship for years, that's not great. It was consensual with the last guy I had sex with. I was in a long-term relationship. I wasn't bothered about it. It didn't hurt me. He was good at doing that, but I'd rather have had the kissing and the touching. Now I'm just really into kissing. So yeah, it's important that you figure out whether, if you do have trauma around sex, whether the trauma is what caused you to not want sex, or whether it's the trauma is a result of the fact you didn't want sex in the first place and you're asexual, right? Because if you grew up lacking sexual attraction and feeling different towards people, then you put yourself in situations where you have sex because that's what society tells you you've got to have, and then you think, hang on a minute, I don't really want this, but you carry on doing it because it's expected of you in a relationship. That is going to traumatize you because it's not natural to you, doesn't feel right to you, and it's not good for you. So I think you need to basically reflect and unpick in your mind by taking some time for yourself, like, what is actually you and what is societal conditioning? What are your own thoughts and beliefs, and what is societal conditioning? If you're a person that has sex, how do you feel about it? Do you actually enjoy it? Do you like it, whether you're asexual or not? Or do you just like cringe at it? Do you just feel uneasy? Do you try and avoid it? Because the problem is, a lot of the time in relationships, if you're a sex repulsed person, then you will avoid having intimacy, physical intimacy with your partner in order to avoid sex, rather than just saying, look, I'm not into sex. I love kissing you. I love cuddling you. I love being really close to you. I love holding hands with you, but I just really don't want the sex. You're afraid of saying that and having that conversation. And it's a shame, because the more we open up and understand that not everyone wants, likes, or needs sex or feels the urge for it, when we accept that as a society, finally, which is what I want us to do, that as some people who feel that way, we can then have a lot more open, honest conversations and real conversations and relationships, and form deeper, intimate bonds with people, because people can understand us on a more level that's unique to our own personal being and circumstances, right? Because at the moment, when I'm on dating sites, the guys there, they just can't contemplate a relationship without sex. And I know that they want sex. So therefore, I'll just stop anything and just say, look, I'm asexual. I don't want sex. I'm assuming you do. And I'll cut to the chase, and usually they're like, "Yeah, I do. I can't live without sex." I'm like, "Okay, no problem. Bye," and that's it. I it doesn't worry me. Oh, this guy left my life because he doesn't want sex. I'm happy for that because I don't want to be with a guy who wants something that I can't give. I don't want to be with a guy who wants me to do something that I don't want to do. I don't want to be with a guy who wants me to do something that is unnatural for me, right? And so we can have more open, honest conversations. We can decipher for ourselves whether sex is something we actually want or we've been told we have to have. We can have more open, honest conversations in relationships and dating and say, hey, I don't consider sex, if you don't, as something that I want. I don't consider that as part of a relationship. I don't want that as part of a relationship. We can have we can choose what we want, so we can have the choice of whether to view something that's sexual or not. I choose not to watch television because it's really bad for the mind. So a lot of the time I don't see anything that's sexual. I don't read magazines usually. I don't watch TV, and I'm very careful about what movies I watch. So as asexuals, we're responsible for our own life and what we view. And I managed to see a lot of movies without sex. You can go to this live stream channel, Asexualize My Asexual Life. If you're on Facebook, go to the YouTube channel and you'll see that there is, in fact, a playlist there called No Sex Movie Reviews. Right, and I review no sex movies. There are a lot of movies without sex in them. Some still have some sexiness sometimes, but like Argyle that I recently reviewed, that has no sex, but it does have some sexy scenes like, cleavage showing and stuff like this. So, we can choose what we watch. We can choose what we can consume. We can choose what we're programmed. If you think that if you think you need to watch a program because you've got an addiction to the program basically, and you've got to put up with sex because of that, then that's your choice. You still have the choice to say, no, I'm not going to succumb to this. I'm not going to get addicted to a TV program. I'm going to just not watch it anymore. I used to be a soap addict. I used to be addicted to Emmerdale and Coronation Street. And I changed my life. So it was no longer busts and boobs and, cleavage, whatever you want to call it, and bums and legs and things on display that I didn't want to see. It was no longer that in my life, and I changed to self-development and developing and growing me and becoming a better version of me, right? I got rid of all that TV rubbish. I got rid of all that addiction, and it is addictive. Even when I went to my parents at Christmas, I could feel like myself getting back into the storyline because they're like TV addicts. And I could see myself getting back into the storyline and thinking, what happens to whom? And I want to know what happens next. I'm thinking, no, you don't need this in your life, Sandra. You manage perfectly well without it. You don't have a TV license anymore, so you can't watch it anyway. And no, I don't want to watch it on catch-up TV either, because I don't watch that type of thing anymore. I only see it when I go over my parents because they happen to have it on all the time. And it's either I watch stuff with them to spend time with them, or I don't spend time with them because it's like them and the TV, not them without the TV. That's a pure example of TV addicts, although I love my parents dearly. So you know what I mean, they're just the opposite to me. And so we have a choice of what we watch, we have a choice of what we consume, and we have a choice over our own bodies, and we have a choice over our own relationships, right? And when we come into adulthood, the more we come into our own mind rather than conditioned mind, the more we can understand in life that we have our own choices. We can choose not to accept what our parents and teachers and caregivers and other family members told us. We can choose not to agree with it. We can choose not to agree to have sex in a relationship. We can choose not to do what others tell us to do. Because it's just important that we be ourselves. And the more we do work on ourselves, the more we self-develop ourselves, the more we grow our own self-esteem, make our own self happy, love ourselves, the more we don't need these external sources to validate us, the more we can choose the life that we want to live. right? The more we can break away from societal conditioning. The only reason a lot of people are conditioned and programmed and continue to be that throughout their lives is because they're unconscious. They're not aware of it. And to actually be different can be hard sometimes. But once you get the hang of being different, standing out from the crowd and not being the same as everyone else, and people just expect you to be different anyway, then like, oh yeah, the crazy girl or whatever, or hyperromantic girl, or she's different. The more you be yourself, the more people tend to leave you alone after a while because they're like, oh, I can't be converting her anymore. And that's a good thing, right? You don't want to be converted. You don't want to be conditioned and controlled. You want to have your own mind. So the more you break away from the societal conditioning, cultural conditioning, family conditioning, the more you break away from that and be your true authentic self, the more you stand in your personal power, the more you empower other people to do the same. And the more that you can get away from this conditioning and you can break free of it, the more people can see that other people are different and it's okay to be different, the more it's helpful and has a domino effect with other people allowing themselves to be different and being okay with it. I don't care what people think about me. I couldn't care less. Hasn't always been the case because I like being different. If someone calls me crazy, I'm like, fine, I'm crazy. If someone calls me weird, I'm like, fine, I'm weird. Who cares? Right? It's better that than being boring. Right? So we need to understand that we have a choice and we can choose to be different and we can choose to live in our authentic power as ourselves. By living your true authentic power, other people can't have power and control over you. People only have power and control over you if you allow them to instill fear into you, if you don't act or behave or think or do certain things that they see that you should be doing. This is how manipulation and control works. There's a lot of cultures where people do what their parents tell them to do, right? And they won't deviate from that because they'll bring shame upon their family, shame upon their community, and that is a form shame is a form of punishment to keep you in line and being controlled and manipulated and conditioned and programmed. So until you break free from that, you're always going to be in that state. So you have to understand that in order to change, you have to be strong within yourself and say, hey, this is not who I am. It might be who my family is or community is or who that person is, but it's not who I am. And I'm choosing not to be like that. And I'm going to continue being my true authentic self, and I'm going to be more of myself. The more of yourself you are, the more you'll love yourself and you'll love your life as a consequence. Right? So this is what we have to do, build our own self-esteem up, love ourselves, focus on ourselves, on our own ideology, and be with ourselves. Close our eyes and feel our bodies. Close our eyes and think, what do we really want in our own life? What choices do we want to make for ourselves? What decisions do we want to make? How do we want to live our life? It's no good having sex for someone else just for the sake of it because it doesn't work. Like, that's repressing and suppressing your own feelings and emotions. I'm not saying you can't have sex to please a partner, but you shouldn't have it just to please a partner. You shouldn't just be doing it to people please because that isn't healthy for you. Right? If you're a type of person who's submissive and loves pleasing someone, and submissiveness is just your natural persona and how you like to be, then you'll find that good if you enjoy and get pleasure out of being submissive and doing what your partner wants you to do and stuff like that. Because that's your natural state of being. And there's quite a lot of controversy over guys being submissive as well. It's kind of like known by society that men are meant to be dominant one, men are meant to be the leader, but some guys don't actually like that. Some guys want to be led by a woman. Some guys want to be submissive to a woman. Some guys don't want the responsibility of being the leader in the relationship. Some guys don't want the responsibility of telling a woman what to do or helping a woman to do what she needs to do or guiding her or whatever. Some guys like women to do that. And again, why is that so frowned upon by society? Why does that seem so wrong? It seems wrong in conventional relationships. But let's be honest, like, who really here is in a conventional relationship and happy and everything's actually conventional like they were brought up and conditioned to believe? Like, there are deviances, there are nuances. There are things you will do in your life in a relationship that you probably didn't even think you do. And there's things you don't do that maybe you wish you did. because you're programmed and conditioned to believe relationships are based on certain things. Yet if we had more open, honest discussions about what we really need and want in a relationship before we even get into a relationship, that would make our relationships so much better. And that's what should be happening to be healthy. We should be having open, honest conversations about what we really want in a relationship, about how the roles work, how the gender roles will work, how the dynamics will work. Because if you've got two people in a relationship who both want to lead, that's going to be very difficult. You know, you can't really have two people trying to lead the relationship. You've got to have kind of a leader and a follower a bit, or a submissive. Like, this is why in a lot of relationships you have submissive and dominant. There's some people who can be submissive and dominant switch roles, but you don't usually have two dominant people at the same time or two submissive people at the same time. Right? You can have someone who's dominant and submissive and they decide to switch roles, but you can't usually have two at the same time. Right? So you need to decide how there's a dynamic going to work in the relationship, in the friendship, and stuff like this. Right? Because it doesn't have to be a relationship. You can have friendships if you're not interested in relationships. But we have to understand, again, it's how we've been conditioned and programmed. Like, most people are conditioned and programmed that you have to have sex, marriage, and kids, be in a relationship forever, and do a 9-to-5 job and die. Well, you don't have to do just that. You don't have to be married. You can live separately. You don't have to have kids. Just because you're single forever as well doesn't mean to say you're worth anything less than someone who's in a relationship. Some people prefer to be single. Some people are better off being single. So again, there shouldn't be a stigma about being single whatever age you are. It's okay to be single. If you want to be single for the rest of your life, that's perfectly fine. Right? And if you change your mind about who you are, that's fine. But what's not fine is the programming conditioning from birth and society that's drilled into you so much that you don't even understand who you are. And it takes you years to fathom out what you really want for yourself. We need to get people to understand that conditioning and programming people is not a good thing. People should be able to decide for themselves what type of relationship they want, who they want in the relationship, and how they want each person in the relationship to show up for each other. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful, helpful, insightful. I really hope that more education is done in the future so we can understand that relationships do not have to be just a certain set heterosexual way or sexual way. That there is people out there who definitely do not want, like, or need sex in a relationship, and that is okay. Wherever you are, please give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Comment in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to my Asexualize My Asexual Life YouTube channel. Even if you're a viewer on there not yet subscribed, please subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell icon as well on YouTube so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to follow me on social media. And I'll see you soon in the next video or live stream. If you want me to make any other videos on specific topics related to asexuality, please do comment and I'll endeavour to do a live stream for you. Anyway, lots of love. Thanks to Jonathan for being in chat today, and Kevin, I think is that person's name. So thank you so much for being here, and thanks for everyone else for watching. Whether you've commented or not, I love you lots. See you soon and take care. Have an ace day.